Khara, thank you so much for joining us today on the Rising Beyond podcast. I am just happy we're recording on a Friday to have a friend chatting with me.
It's a good way to end the week. We already said that offline, so might as well reiterate it here. Happy to be here.
Yes, I'm excited. So we had a recent Q&A in the Rising Beyond community. It was a free Q&A with a divorced financial analyst and certified financial planner who understands domestic violence, coercive control, and how that plays into finances. And during that Q&A, I really noticed, yes, there were logistical money questions about how do I know if I should fight for the house or I can afford to take over the loan of a house, things like that. And some of the things that were coming up were not in that logistical realm. They were in this emotional space, which is why I asked you to be here, because finances and emotions actually come together. It's not just numbers. So can
That's
you
right.
share a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, well, I'm a serial entrepreneur, but for the purpose of today's podcast episode, I'm a financial therapist. So I am all about the intersection of emotions and money. We talk about healing your relationship with money, thoughts, feelings, behaviors with money. So I talk feelings, shame, financial trauma, anxiety all day long, every day, and especially this week, as we talked about before we hit
Yeah.
record. Put a lot of for that.
Yeah, and I think that it is so important because your finances not just impact a small stress level, right? If you are financially not stable at all, that is the number one bottom layer of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it actually will impact the way your nervous system is reacting.
Right. hmm Yep. Triggered all over the place. I have lots of stories to illustrate this, even just from this week, because it changes your behaviors, has a ripple effect in
Mhm.
relationships and your work and your focus. So many different pieces we could name.
Yeah. And when it is even added to when someone has used finances, money, and continues to use finances as a tool of control, as a tool to further abuse, it adds that different layer to what money means and your beliefs about yourself and money. I'm imagining that the relationship piece with money and your beliefs about money comes up in a lot of what you do with
hmm
people.
Very much so. We call it the money healing bucket of the 3 buckets of financial therapy. And that's where we like to start with folks is like, let's look at your behavior. Let's look at your beliefs. Let's look at the scripts of how you show up with your money. And that can be very eye opening, if not just opening up for self compassion of like, oh, that's why I do what I do. It makes sense now why I have this current relationship with money. Maybe it's, as old as when you were 3 years old, as the example of one person I worked with this week. It's like, oh, it's been around for a long time if you're like in your 40s or 50s dealing with this stuff. So it's very much a tool of self compassion and normalization.
Yeah. Can you share some examples of how money mindset or beliefs around finances, money kind of show up from childhood messaging?
Yeah. So it could be something as I'm going to call it simple, even though it's not simple, but on the spectrum, it's the simple
Yes.
example. It could be something as simple as your parents fighting about money consistently throughout your childhood and you saying, I don't even want to talk or think about money because of how awful that was. So speaking to the nervous system, right? Like that activation. I don't want to ever think about money. So we then have someone who's in money avoidance. They put their head in the sand. They don't look at their bank accounts. They have a visceral internal reaction when people talk about money or what's owed to them. And so those folks, 70% of mental health professionals are avoidant with money. So that's why I serve therapists on that. So that's one example on the one end of the spectrum. And then one of the more extreme that just showed up this week is this person who had a sexual abuse childhood experience, and the person gave her money every time that they abused her. And so in her adulthood, she's like, I want nothing to do with money. I spend it as quickly as I earn it. I don't want it to sit here. And she's hyper independent. She doesn't want to rely on anyone or anything. And she's currently in some financial distress, which is why she came to financial therapy. But that
Mhm.
compassion was, can you understand why your youngest self rejects money? Can you understand why you're hyper independent now as an adult? And so just putting those puzzle pieces together, I think is going to help her lean into some of that IFS parts work that we love to do as therapists to be like, I get you. I understand for you,
Mhm.
7-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old, whoever it was, who's basically saying, I want nothing to do with money. And the behavior just shows up differently.
Yeah. And we see so often one of the most common phrases that is said and then believed is you're pretty irresponsible with money, or you're just not good at numbers. So I'm going to take over and I will take over the finances so that you don't have to worry, which then my people don't know the numbers. They don't know anything about their finances and are financially abused in that way. But then they do take on the like, oh, I am irresponsible with money.
Yeah.
I'm not good at numbers. And so it shows up in adulthood in similar ways.
Absolutely. I mean, what you described there is one person I worked with, another financial therapist colleague said, oh, this is my math trauma. And I was like, wait, what's math trauma? And she talked about, okay, as a woman, as a girl, she was not encouraged to understand math. She was told, you're not going to get it. You're stupid with math. You're not going to understand numbers. And so there's a gender power dynamic already right there in childhood of like girls are not encouraged to understand numbers or understand math. And so then we put them in these relationships. It's very common for someone with a money avoidance script to pair up with someone who's really good with money to reinforce, I don't have to deal with this. I want to farm this off to someone else. You handle it. I don't feel intelligent with money. And so when you and I first connected on this issue a couple of years ago, I had coined the term financial gatekeeping, which is like the middle of, it's not great, but it's not financial abuse. And so some people passively or unconsciously pair up with someone who's an engineer, computer scientist, someone who like cliche is good with numbers, accountants, of course. And they pair with them so they don't have to do that growth of, oh, I have to learn money. I have to understand how it works. So it reinforces the belief, but in a more passive way than you described.
Mhm. Yeah. And over time, if they've left, if they haven't left, their relationship, wow, that fear of not being able to make it on their own, not understanding money, how are they going to do this? That keeps people stuck in those relationships.
Oh, yeah.
Other than protecting the kids, which if y'all are listening to my podcast, you know that is not protecting the kids to stay for the most part, but the financial piece is the other number one. I think they're pretty paired of why someone will not leave an abusive relationship is due to finances.
Oh, yeah. Isn't the stat a woman who gets divorced or leaves a relationship loses 3/4 of her income or something crazy like that? So even from a logistical economic perspective, to start over, or say I have no financial literacy, which is the understanding of how your money works, to leave a relationship and start over with none of that would be daunting. And we're wired to avoid pain, which is why that financial gatekeeping piece came up of like, oh, this is painful to me. I would happily let someone take this on. There's this fantasy of, please, someone come in and manage this for me. And so there's a lot of work to be done in financial therapy around empowerment and saying, like, you can do this, and you can have a new version of yourself that understands money. And it's going to take a little bit of work rather than that avoidance they're so used to, so comfortable with.
Where would be maybe those first steps? Because for my mamas, they are overwhelmed with shit they have to figure out, like so overwhelmed. And so where is almost that first place to that they could start? Because shame is right, the bread and butter of an abuser.
Yeah.
If they can have their partner feel shame of anything, so around finances, that's just one more way they've got them. So what might be a first step as someone is trying to understand that money so that they can get stability?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different directions this can go depending on what their resources are, because I want to be thoughtful as not everyone has the bandwidth or the resources. Sometimes it's listening to a podcast like this and saying, can I get curious about my money beliefs of like, is money good? Is money bad? Is money evil? Is money a tool or an opportunity? The average human has 50 to 200 money beliefs, and I don't expect your mamas to just figure out all 200 of them.
Mhm.
Having that language, now we can start to notice, oh, I have a belief about single mothers and money. I have a belief about welfare. I have a belief about rich or wealth. I have a belief about working parents, right? So we have all of these beliefs, but now we're more conscious of them. And sometimes that
Mhm.
naturally creates the shift of like, you have to know what's going on to then change what's going on, right? That pre-contemplation to contemplation and motivational interviewing. And so sometimes it's a podcast, sometimes it's a book, or a couple of books I really love that people can take in, audiobook, or if they have time to read a little bit as they're waiting for their kids at car pickup line or whatever that looks
Mhm.
like, to just start to marinate in that. Can I stay curious? Can I stay open to, is there something I can learn about myself? If they can do that, then I think they can move into the true financial therapy work, whether that's in a group format, which there's a lot of groups for moms right now that are happening, which I'm happy to share and say, yes, hooray. because that community helps us go, oh, I'm not alone. It's not
Yes.
just me. I'm
Yep.
not the only one doing this. And so I have at least 3 colleagues who have specifically focused on women or mothers to say, we want to help you feel empowered with your money. So that feels more accessible in the group format versus the one-to-one financial therapy.
Yeah. And I believe that healing happens in community, right? It's why I started a community, because not just all the research, but all of my experience with survivors is their healing is exponentially faster when they're doing it with other people that understand. So they don't feel alone, so that right? Like healing relational trauma happens in relationships. So I think that group aspect could be really, really helpful. And with someone who can speak to it. So similar to, doing any sort of like trauma work or form of therapy, financial therapy is very specialized. Like, I don't think that I would, I'm not competent to be like, we're doing financial therapy today.
Yeah.
Like, can I talk about finances? Sure, absolutely. And what that brings up. But I really do think that it is very specialized. What's something that you feel like you as a financial therapist, as you were learning, going through that journey, is, oh my gosh, knowing, like, being able to do this or help with this is
Mm.
the magic button.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, and I've talked about this a lot recently on some different podcasts, is there's this concept of money scripts, and that's Dr. Brad Klotz's work, and he came up with 4 money scripts of like how we show up in our behavior with money. And I remember when I first learned those in my own journey to become a financial therapist, I did a lot. I did like 6 months of intense work on myself, ugly cried every session with my mentor. It was just like, oh, it was a lot. And I remember getting to the scripts and going, oh, this makes so much sense why I'm a workaholic entrepreneur. And I called my sister in tears and I was like, this is why we are the way we are. And she's like, what are you doing? What's going on? Are you okay? But hysterical. And so even with my clients now, I still introduce those 4 scripts to say, here's some language. Does this explain some of what's going on for you? But then it kind of transformed to, oh, all 4 of those scripts are pathologizing. All 4 of them are not like what I'm like, sign me up. I want this. Hooray. I'm so happy to have this horrible script.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so as I've leaned more into this role as a financial therapist, I've created 3 healthy, quote unquote, money scripts. I'm like, what are we moving towards? So for women,
Mhm.
for mamas, for people who are doing this work, it's like, cool, I want to know where I'm starting, but I also want to know where I'm headed. And so I was like, well, let's find some ways to measure that of like, are you one step closer to one of these healthy money scripts versus the money avoidant, money hypervigilant combinations I see first?
Yeah. Yeah. And there does need to be that hopeful focus, because so much, specifically for this audience, because there's so many areas where they have literally zero control. Zero. They can only control how they show up in a system that is broken. And I don't even know, that's a whole nother topic. I was going to say, some people
Right.
are like, it's not broken. It's doing exactly what it's meant to do, is keep people in power and all the things. That's a whole nother episode. And so if we can't find moments of hope and those tiny little moments of progress, those teeny little elements of progress, I don't think it works for specifically this population. But my guess is with most people, there needs to be an element of hope.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, why are we going to work so damn hard if we can't find a way to measure that it's working? Right. It's like, that's a mantra that's very common in financial therapy is I'm working on it or it's working, as in like small baby steps. It's not overnight that all of a sudden I'm out of, $40,000 of credit card debt. It's not overnight that I figured out my student loan payments. It's not overnight that I make enough income to live the life I want. And so sometimes I usually have them think about, what do you want your future relationship with money to look like? And then we make it measurable. So think SMART goals from therapy of specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And so sometimes when I work with my clients, they go, oh, I'm halfway there. And I didn't realize that because I didn't
Mhm.
make it measurable. I thought this was so far forward, such a pipe dream. And then they sit back and go, I'm on my way. I'm halfway there, or 2% there. I don't know, whatever it looks like. So having hope, but then also having it be measurable, like how will I know when it's working? How will I know when I'm closer to that end goal? That stokes the fire of motivation. We're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep going, even though it's hard.
And my guess is some of those goals aren't like, this is how much money's in my bank account. Like some of it probably is, this is
Yeah.
how much I've been able to save or something like that. But those, my guess, are not the goals, not always
No.
the goals.
I mean, there's always a number that we want to see. And there's a number that when it goes below it, we're really uncomfortable or itchy, as I like to say to my clients, like, you're getting uncomfortable and itchy. But often when I ask, what do you want your future relationship with money to be? It's emotional words. Like, I want to feel stable. I want to feel safe. I want to feel financial freedom. I want to feel like I can do what I want to do when I want to do it. I want to feel like I'm in control of my money. My money is not in control of me. And it's like, oh, yeah, because money is a relationship too. So for this podcast, when we think about power and control, some of your people are going to feel in power and control. Money is controlling. Like, oh, I don't feel like I have any say. I feel like money is my abuser in some respect. And that's a whole different power flex. So as we can talk about it, what we do with that. But like for so many people, when I ask, what do you want your future relationship with money to be? It's usually around freedom, stability, security are the top 3 words I hear again and again and again.
Yeah, it's so devastating. So we're meeting with Jen, who is an amazing financial planner and analyst. And it was like all of the fears of like, how do I plan for the next 10 years where my ex is going to take me back to family court at least once a year? How do I plan for a $300,000 family court journey? And it's like, fuck. So when you're talking about like the money, so it's not specifically the money having control, right? Like that is an element of your partner having control, but then it comes into these pieces of, of financial fears and there not being enough. And that fear of like, if I don't have enough, I might lose my kids because he's got lots of money. If I don't have enough money, then XYZ. I'll look bad in court because I have to go pro se. And my ex has this like hotshot attorney. I'll look bad, like, oh, this is so heartbreaking. And I think it plays in. I have this thought. Maybe you're going to be like, nope, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But it's okay. So we have had discussions where parents, like you go to the pediatrician or you go to different providers and they ask you about housing security or food insecurity. And so many of my moms will not check those boxes to get the resources because there is such a fear of, one, how their ex will use that information, but 2, how they will look to the decision makers.
Heartbreak.
Right? So even I feel like that has this messaging too of what people perceive is worth based on your ability to provide food, your ability to have safe housing, your ability to do all these things.
Yeah. I mean, even outside of this dynamic of the people listening to your podcast who are going to be going through this, when you said earlier, like, oh, it's usually the abuser or the person trying to control them. Well, some people who are not in this circumstance still feel controlled by money for those same reasons of like, my self-worth is my net worth, which is something a lot of Enneagram 3s believe. And we're both 3s. I'm going to out you right now. So we'll hope that's okay.
I'm 3, everybody.
So like the workaholism shows up for us, or like we feel very like internally motivated to look successful. And so even when they're not in an abusive or power control situation, there are so many people in this world who feel controlled by money because it's such a part of our life. It's, I have to have a certain amount in the bank account. I have to have this much in savings. I'm way behind my peers if I'm not retiring early or retiring by a certain age. I'm failing if I'm not making this much per year. And I see this with my students too, where I'm like, how much do you want to make a year? And it's like 3 times what you and I would have aspired to at that age. And it's partly inflation and it's partly what does success look like? So it's why I wrote a book on Enneagram and money, because there's this relationship we have to money outside of the relationships we have with people. Sometimes the relationships with people impact how we see money, which we started our conversation there. But oftentimes we already have this internal relationship with money of like, I feel controlled by it. I want to avoid it. I hate it. I love it. And sometimes that's modeled by our families of how they showed up with money. And we're like, either I want to be like them or we're like, oh, hell no, I want to be the complete opposite of them when it comes to money behavior. So it's just, there's so many layers here.
Yeah. And I'm thinking if someone is going to maybe journal or do some sort of reflection on this, what would be maybe some questions that would be good journal prompts that they could start with as they start getting curious about this?
Oh, yeah. My 2 favorites. We talked about one, which is what do you want your future relationship with money to look like? So that's the prompt, journal about it. I invite people to think about it's the miracle question, right? If you woke up tomorrow and everything was great or solved with money, how would your life look? and like look at all the rings of ripple effect, right? So how will your relationship with your kids change? How will your relationship with your ex-partner change? How will your relationship with your family, your community, your work change? And it's so interesting to see that because that translates to how will it look when I'm in a better spot or a different spot with money. The second prompt is my favorite. I do it with every single client, regardless of why they're coming in, which is a word association. And so the prompt goes something like, what shows up for you, uncensored, when I say the following 4 words?
Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah, like, let's do it simple. Let's see what Sybil says. Your first word is savings. What shows up when you hear the word savings?
Safety. Need it. A little bit of anxiety. That word didn't come up, but that was the feel.
Yeah.
Of like,
just like a somatic.
I need it. Okay.
As financial therapists, we're all about what the body does as much as what you verbally say to us. So I really appreciate you just saying, oh, I had this like tinge of something show up in my body. And listeners will have that too. So often there's not one response to savings we're looking for. Some people are like, oh my gosh, I love it. It feels like security. And other people are like, oh my God, this is a fucking pipe dream. I wish I had it. And I feel ashamed because I don't have it. And so many Americans don't have savings, which is a whole other conversation. One little bird brought up some stuff, right? So people can journal about that, sit in it, talk about it with someone they trust. Second word for you, Sybil, debt.
Fuck.
Yeah. Very common response.
Yeah, it was like, don't want it. I feel grateful. Actually, grateful shows up because I don't have a lot of debt.
Yeah. And so for your mamas, that's probably not true for them that they don't have a lot of debt, right? So debt, historically, as I do this exercise for the last few years, most people are like, oh, hell no. There's always like 1% that's like, I'll use debt to build my wealth. They might like buy an extra property.
Yeah.
They have the privilege of that, right? That's very privileged to be able to do that. But so often, especially when I'm talking to Americans, they're like, debt is a big dark hole that I want to avoid. And if I'm in it, it's shame spiral all over the place.
Yeah.
I messed this up. Debt is predatory. There was debtor's prison. So we actually have intergenerational trauma from debt because you were punished and your life was collapsed and like you were put in jail when you're owing debts to people back in the ages. So there's a lot to that layer. And then when I talk to like my students who are from other countries, they're like, you don't go into debt. Like, it's just like a hard no. Like, if you don't have the money, you don't go into debt. And I was like, oh, how interesting.
Yeah, you're like, that's actually not what it looks like here.
Yeah. And there's that judgment from them to Americans as they say that. I'm like, now I want you to notice that as a therapist because they're therapists in training, right? I want you to notice the behavior.
Yeah.
Third word, if you're still willing to play with me, Sybil, is credit card.
Tool.
Interesting. Say more about that.
Yeah, I'm thinking business-wise, it's like a tool to get what I need when I need it. Gotta spend money to make money, kind of feel a little bit annoyed because everywhere you go, they're like, would you like to open this credit card and save 30% on your order at the Gap?
Yep.
I would say if I'm thinking from my community, like hearing credit card maxed out. Play like too many. Thinking about my people of almost like Tetris. Yeah. Credit card Tetris.
Like make it all work. And it's survival for a lot of people there, right? I'm surviving. And so the word predatory often shows up with credit cards for the exact scenario you just described, which is, oh my God, everywhere I go, they're trying to give me one. For some Americans from the place of privilege, if they went to college, the first thing they did is walk across the quad or the green and get someone saying, hey, here's the credit card.
Oh, yes.
Money. And all these folks who didn't have financial literacy are like, oh my gosh, I get free money? That's awesome. And so now they've created a debt experience because they didn't have the financial understanding of this has high interest and you have to pay it. And so some people that I've worked with have a lot of anger towards that system. So like, I didn't know what I was getting into. I was 18 years old, 19 years old, didn't understand what a credit card had anything to do with their life. Here's some fun little facts for your listeners. And I'm going to ask this of you, Sybil. What number of credit cards does the average American have?
Oh, gosh. 8.
Ooh, very close. 7.
All right.
Yeah. So if you think about the big box stores, as well as the big names of Visa, MasterCard, et cetera, the average American has 7. And we're not really sure what the balance is on all of those, right? So we know when people are willing to share their financial circumstance, they say, yes, I have these cards, but we don't know if they all have balances or if they're maxed out, as you were saying, for some of your folks. And so sometimes just sharing that gives people either an exhale of relief or an exhale like, oh, I feel seen. Second part of this question is, what's the average debt people have on credit cards overall? Average for Americans.
I would say it's probably in like the 20,000s, maybe.
So I imagine that's more related to the fact that you're working with a population with high expenses of like lawyers and stuff. Because I'm like, that's higher
Yes.
than the average. Which again, this is not meant to create shame for your listeners. I
Mm-mm.
think it's just like this is
Knowledge.
awareness, of what's going on. So with the understanding that people are not forthcoming about their debts, we're kind of moving towards that transparency, but we're still not there. What we have in our data is 10,000 is the average for Americans on their credit cards. So consumer debt specifically. That's not student loans. That's not a car. That's not a house. That's just credit cards. And again, I usually have people have a somatic experience where I invite them to slow down and say, what are you noticing as in your body as you hear that? And some will exhale saying, I'm so glad that's me. And others are like, I have 50,000. What's that say about me? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking all of my mamas who are going to lean more towards the shame piece. It's just information and you can't measure your situation, right? If we did this kind of activity or exercise within the Rising Beyond community, the numbers would look different.
Yep.
I know women who are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on family court trials.
Yeah.
On attorneys, right? When the retainer of an attorney is $10,000. There you go. There's your 10,000. You just in that one thing met the average. So I'm thinking as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, brings up so much anger around systems.
That's right. Yeah.
That you in one go are meeting the average debt of Americans in one foul swoop that's going to be used in 4 months of your attorney.
Yeah. I mean, this is where your population and people who have medical crises are the same. Of one event can happen, or in this case, one retainer can happen, and they're in debt for years, if not their whole life, because it's now piled up in a way that it's hard to tackle. It feels it's forever. I'm going to die with debt, is what I've heard clients say.
Yeah. Like a PRE evaluation is around $20,000.
That's wild. Yeah. And so to your point, and hopefully if we still have your listeners and they're still engaged with us and not telling them to go fuck myself, just providing information here. What we do know is that we'd rather talk about our sex lives than our money lives. And so the numbers I've shared today in this episode are probably underrepresented. So to your point, maybe it is closer to 20,000. We had I don't remember which news system it was, but someone was interviewing couples and saying, tell us about your debt. And they were spelling it out. I have this much in student loans, this much in credit card, this much in a car, this much in a house. And I loved that movement because it normalized that we all had some amount of debt and that debt itself didn't be shameful. But I don't know if that's still going on. My point is, we'd rather talk about our sex lives than our money lives, which tells me that even as we collect this information or ask people in an anonymous survey, we're not always getting accurate answers because shame is still there.
So much shame around it. And then especially if you're out there and you're getting the pictures of Disneyland from your ex with your kids, or that's what they're posting on social, or your teen just got a new car from your ex, which, y'all know strings are attached to that. But and you are just barely scraping by, just barely stomaching those things is so hard because shame, their goal is to make you feel shame about this.
Yeah. And so there's lots of movements around trying to help women feel empowered to have financial competency and literacy. Do I even know how this system works? As we named earlier, so many women don't get that education. And so maybe that's a bright spot as people are listening to us at this point in the episode of, yes, you might have tons of debt. Yes, there are solutions. And yes, there are professionals who are not going to reinforce the shame spiral. That's why financial therapists exist. Because we had financial planners and we had mental health folks who are like, we want to help, but we're sticking our foot in it because we aren't saying the right things, or our own bias and beliefs are showing up of like, just get a job. Like, it's not that. It's not that simple. It's like, tell them, just leave the person. Not that simple. So our job is really to have zero judgment and create a safe space for people to talk about what's going on with their money and find solutions, even if that means it's a long journey, right? To get out of debt or to find new awareness. Final word, though, because I said there were 4 words in this exercise. So we looked at savings, debt, and credit card. The last word for you, Sybil, and for our listeners is wealth. What shows up?
Yes, please. I think old money. Thoughts about old money, like long term.
Interesting.
Safety for my kids.
That ripple effect right there.
Mhm.
Would it surprise you, or maybe your listeners wouldn't be surprised, would it surprise you to hear that some people hear ick, ew, no thank you, evil?
Does not surprise. Nope.
Yeah, with the fact that we have people using this as power and control. And so sometimes it's the two sides of the same coin, right? Some people, it's, oh my gosh, I want wealth. I want wealth in relationships. I want to feel wealthy in other ways in my life. And some people are like, ew, wealth is rich people and gross. And sometimes I add a fifth word, which is rich, into the equation of like, with wealth.
That feels yuckier.
Yeah. Yeah. And so stay curious, right? Stay curious. Like, why is one word shifted so much when some people use them interchangeably, wealth and rich or wealthy and rich? But maybe it's the old wealth versus the new rich is something I'm hearing in my head from what you shared. And so this exercise, if people were to journal on it, opens up a lot of those money beliefs we talked about. So we're not getting to all 200, but we're definitely getting some really like pack the punch ones of here's how I feel about debt. Here's how I feel about savings. Here's how I feel about credit cards. And here's what I feel about wealth. And it's like, oh, can I then engage in self-compassion and say that makes so much sense why I'm in the circumstances I'm in? Not all of which I can control, but can I then have some compassion show up of like, yep, connecting the dots, that actually tracks.
Yeah. And that the beliefs about yourself are not true. They're not always true.
Right.
Our brain is like, yes, it is. So you don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, that of course moment, of course you feel like money is dirty, because if you brought money up, in your house, people said something, even the language, like money is dirty. Even think about, you have a little person, she's not probably sticking everything in her mouth anymore, but kids like that put money, like change in their mouth. Ew, gross, that's dirty.
Yep.
Like
Yeah,
that seems so
sure.
silly because it's actually germy and gross, right? Like, who knows how many people touch that. But even just that pairing of language of money is dirty.
Yeah. And then we get to the abuse side and it's like, oh, I'm being paid to be abused, or I'm being paid for my silence, or I'm being paid as in I somehow love you, but this all in my nervous and my body system says this is not okay. I did not consent to this. And watch the, like, I hope there's okay say the mind fuckery that shows up as to why people are coming into this work going, I know something awful happened to me. I'm aware that I was hurt and I still have not healed to get to a place where money is not my enemy.
And I'm thinking that something you said before, because you work with therapists, I work with a lot of therapists, because they're attributes of therapists and people in the helping professions that lead them to be really good targets for someone abusive.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that.
Right? We're empathic. We will work on ourselves. We try to be trauma informed. So, oh, yes, of course, he or she is acting this way because of their childhood stuff. So I'm going to excuse this behavior and all of those pieces. My guess is there would be such overlap in like the people you work with, but then also the people I work with.
Yeah.
Because my guess is those similar qualities play into the money piece too.
Yeah. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with one of my clients who's paired with an engineer. And I was like, you probably are not aware of how common that is in our profession, that therapists pair up with engineers. And it's this right brain, left brain, logic, emotion pairing, right? That can be sometimes compatible and sometimes not. And so that shows up as you share, like, what are some like typical examples of how this goes? And so for money, I mean, sometimes we pair up with people and no one wants to hear this. Sometimes we pair up with people that are our parents because it's familiar. And so if I had an abusive, frugal father who was like, you are not worth this, now I'm going to show up in my adult life being like, oh, I'm not worth that money. I'm not going to advocate to raise my rates as a therapist. I'm not going to advocate to make money. And so noble poverty is something that I talk a lot about in the therapist community, which means we put ourselves in financial distress to serve others. And I remember I created a bullet point list that people were like, like they didn't like had a reason to go. And I was like, if you're an Enneagram 2, which is a helper, if you are a woman, if you are someone raised on Disney movies, you are more likely to experience noble poverty. And they were like, what? And I was like, listen, for the Disney part, if you're raised on Disney movies, who had the money? Who had the money in those movies?
Yeah.
They were evil.
The men.
And
the evil men or evil stepmother or the people that live in the castle.
Yeah. And so that was a social reinforcement of why we don't hold on to money or feel like we should earn money. And then in just the therapeutic community, it's pervasive that we're like, we are good people. We can't make good money. We are here to be good helpers. We cannot make a good living. We're not in it for the money. We have to earn our stripes. All this really gross language in just a master's level of mental health folks. And so, yes, I think there's tons of overlap between your population, my population, the wounded healer. I mean, a lot of us have had our own trauma, which is why we became therapists, or maybe we had a profound experience and wanted to help others. But there is something susceptible in our personality traits that makes us maybe more likely to be abused from what you shared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm thinking, I was just going back to Disney. I'm even thinking of in Cinderella, the evil stepmother and the evil stepsisters, their whole goal was to marry the prince, right? But as I'm thinking about it from this perspective, to get out of this, to be brought into wealth, right? To get the money, to marry the prince.
Yeah. How many cultures have said, go find a man to marry and take care of you? How many of them told us, go get an MRS degree in college? And I was like, what the fuck's that? And they're like, MRS, haha, missus. And I was like, ew, why am I going into debt to go get married? That was absurd to me. But I was also raised by two parents who were like, you're going to be hyper independent. You don't need anyone. And so it's pervasive. Like culturally, it's there of like, someone will take care of you. Find someone who can take care of you. And then these women, with one of my other clients, these women might then become widowed and have no idea how to handle their money. So that's another scenario of immense stress and grief. And they're like, I had no idea. I didn't know that they had these accounts. I don't know how to access the account. I didn't know they had all this debt because it was never talked about, right? We don't talk about. And so it's just, wow, there's so much we can be doing in the financial therapy sphere to make sure everybody is more comfortably talking about money in ways that are empowering. Do you understand your numbers? Do you know what's going on with your partner or spouse? Do you have a temperature check on what's going on with your money? How much you make in a given day or month as a business owner? So many layers.
Yeah. And I'm thinking too, the thing that is I don't know if it's the most aggravating, but in the beginning of a divorce or anytime there's changes, you need to do financial disclosures. And so that brings up a lot of anxiety in doing the financial disclosures. Other people are going to see your money. However, what's so dumb, we have in the Rising Beyond community, we have like it's not really a series, but it's like on this episode of He's a Fucking Idiot.
Love it.
And it is how these abusers hide their money, and they will only give partial disclosures, and they'll only do this, and they'll do like, they just fuck around with money. First of all, because no one's going to hold them accountable to not do it. But they do it, and it causes such distress.
Yeah. And they have the financial literacy to know how to hide it and move it around and all those tools too, right? The part of that's financial infidelity, which is another term in financial therapy, of infidelity, of sexual infidelity. And now we're talking financial infidelity. And the data right now, again, probably underreported, is 43% of couples, American couples, have had some instance of financial infidelity. It's again on a spectrum. It's the most extreme to more benign. More benign might be telling your loved one, your partner or spouse, I bought it on sale and I didn't. It was this much, but it was actually a different number, right? So I think of the Amazon packages sort of situation here for some of those couples. On the more extreme end, it might be, I took out a credit card in your name without your consent. I took your identity and did something that created horrible credit for you where you can't afford a house on your own for you and your kids or something like that awful. And so not everyone is doing that extreme version of financial infidelity, but the fact that we have 43% of people saying, yeah, I've done something in this definition, from the most white lie to most extreme, is fascinating to me, because no therapist program that I know of outside of the financial therapy programs is talking about what financial infidelity looks like and how to talk about it in a session.
Yeah. And granted, I was in school a long time ago in a couples and family program, and money is one of the big four that you're talking about in couples work. But I'm trying to think, again, I haven't done couples work in a long time because I actually hate it, but it's like horrible. It's horrible. As I'm thinking about it, money didn't come up that often, but I also wonder, again, this is not because couples weren't, I don't know if I asked.
Yeah, outright asked. Again, because
I don't know if I was asking about it because it's not something you talk about.
Yep. And so that's what we're trying to crack open, is like, no, we need to talk about money. We need people to talk about how much they make, what they're earning at their job, normalize the income that a stay-at-home mother would be making when she has the 5 million hats she's wearing, right? We want those conversations to be more prevalent. Financial Feminist is one of the people online who's doing that and talking about like, hey, you're a woman. Let's make sure you know what's happening with your money. Here are some strategies and ideas. And so lots of books, lots of podcasts that might help bring people into awareness where they feel like they're in the dark, specifically women.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And I think it's one of the things when I'm training other therapists, specifically on assessing for domestic violence and coercive control within couples work. One of the top questions is, how are financial decisions made?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? Who's responsible for the financial health of your family?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is such an element where coercive control is done, but police aren't asking those questions. Other people that are responsible for keeping families safe, they're not asking any of those questions.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we
so
weren't
that's
trained to.
just, and so that's an area that I'm hoping that more mental health professionals are asking, because it's, oh my gosh, think about just even witnessing the reaction in the room when you ask those questions. That subjective and objective experience of just watching and noticing as a mental health professional gives you so much more data than even what they tell you, even what they say.
Yeah. I mean, one of my esteemed colleagues in the financial therapy space who works with couples, bless his soul, is a marriage and family therapist. A lot of financial therapists on the mental health side, that's where they come from. That's their health discipline, is MFT, because they look at systems. So it makes sense to look at money through a systemic lens. He talks about a healthy couple has a shared financial goal, and that's what brings them together. You can have separate accounts, you can have joint accounts, you can be co-parenting and not even be together. But when you have a shared financial goal, which might be stability for the kids or something you're funding, that actually increases the likelihood of like a healthy couple. And so I hear his voice a lot because I'm like, I don't want to work with couples. You don't want to work with couples. And yet the big question is, why is this not being talked about with therapists so they can be prepared to have those conversations in the room with their clients? It's the same thing with suicide, which is another hat I wear. Like, why are we not comfortable talking about this? Well, as you said, and what I've normalized is we'd rather talk about our sex lives than our money lives. And we're not talking about sex either, unless you're a sex therapist and you love talking about sex. And I love those folks. They're like my kindred spirits. Financial therapists and sex therapists have the same kind of personalities, which is let's go there. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about what's not talked about.
But it's not in grad programs yet. And so that's, I think, a push for a lot of us in the leadership roles of financial therapy is how do I bring this into grad programs and make this normal to talk about?
Yeah. Yep. Well, I'm hopeful that this was helpful for you if you're listening, because it is something that I noticed showing up. And so if you do have financial questions, like mindset questions, beliefs that you are curious about, shoot me an email, info@risingbeyondpc.com, and we will see if we can get you a resource. I am connected with Khara always, so we have access to Khara if we need her. Khara, and could you send me some of the resources, podcast, books, so that I can post them so that anyone listening that wants to dive deeper can access those?
Absolutely.
And then, if someone is interested in either working with you or learning more about you, because I assume financial therapy, do you still have to work in Colorado?
Nope.
As a therapist? Nope. You can.
Coaching model.
Okay. So you can work with people all over, because sometimes it's like, oh, if you live in Colorado, da da da. So where could they find you and all the info about you?
Yeah. So a ton of stuff's on my website. You'll see all my different projects as a serial entrepreneur. But it's crossratecounselingplc.com/financial therapy. And that's where all of the podcasts I've done on financial therapy live. Everything from those Disney things, the little truth bombs we dropped today, to the money beliefs of 4-word association. But yeah, I love working with therapists or professional helpers in the sense of they're healers or therapists. Coaches sometimes get into my caseload, but really they have that money avoidance, that money shame, and sometimes financial trauma. And that's what I'm working with them on.
Yeah, I was going to say the majority of my clients, I would say financial trauma is in their journeys as they're healing.
That makes sense.
So, well, thank you. And I'm hopeful that this will pique curiosity for some of you listening. So thank you for being here, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Rising Beyond podcast.